Hello, everybody. Yesterday, I talked to you guys about my favorite books of the year, which means today we're going to be talking about my least favorite books of 2019. Most of these were not actually horrible. Like, a lot of them I gave 2, maybe even 2.5 stars, but they just were not that great, kind of disappointing. And I wouldn't say I liked any of them. A lot of them, actually, I feel like looking back, I was even generous with some of my ratings. They're not really 2.5s, they're more like 2 stars. But for the most part, I didn't read a lot of books that I absolutely hated. There was really just one of those, and we'll get to that one. But these are the 11 books that I disliked the most out of everything that I read in 2019. I landed on 11 because that's just the number that I condensed this list down to, and I didn't want to eliminate anything else off of it. Here we go. I believe I actually have 3 thrillers on this list, so let's start with those. I just am so disappointed by thrillers most of the time I read them. I keep saying this, but I want to read a good thriller, but every thriller I pick up I don't really like, so I just don't think I really like thrillers, but I want to like them so bad. I read A Simple Favor by Darcy Bell in 2019, and it just was not very good. It was not suspenseful. Nothing surprised me. The reveals were ridiculous. The science behind everything was so ridiculous. The suspension of disbelief that you needed to extend to this book, I could not extend because it was not good enough for me to give it that allowance. I was pretty disappointed by this one. Another thriller that I read that I just was disappointed by was Under the Harrow by Flynn Barry. This wasn't quite as bad as A Simple Favor, but it just left me feeling pretty disappointed. I really liked it in the beginning, but then the book just steadily got worse and worse after that. I just was not impressed with it by the end of it. And it left me feeling like it was maybe a waste of my time. It was a disappointing reveal. The way that it was narrated was really bizarre, and it didn't get along with me. Don't know what else to say about it. It was a thriller that disappointed me. Surprise, surprise. The last thriller that disappointed me in 2019 was a short story or novella of a thriller, and it is The Grown Up by Gillian Flynn. I pretty much have kind of known that I don't like Gillian Flynn after really disliking Gone Girl, and this kind of confirmed it for me. I don't like the way she writes, and I feel like she writes in a way that is fake feminist and a lot of stuff for shock value that doesn't really impress me, and I just didn't really like the way that this book wrapped up. The ending was meant to make you feel one type of way, but it left me feeling a different type of way, and I didn't like it. Yeah, that one was also not good. What have we learned? The endings of thrillers disappoint me. Next up, let's talk about some graphic novels, because I had some disappointing graphic novels in 2019 as well, which is disappointing because I love graphic novels and I didn't read very many of them in 2019, and it really sucks that I had 3 graphic novels that made my least favorite books of the year list, because generally I actually do enjoy graphic novels. But the ones that did not work for me, we have Sweater Weather by Sarah Varon, which is kind of a short story collection. I don't really know how to describe the format of this book. It has a lot of different little mini graphic endeavors in it, and I just found it very confusing and difficult to get along with. I didn't know if it was supposed to be for children or for adults. I didn't know if it was supposed to be funny because it kind of seemed like it was, but then it wasn't actually funny to me, and I don't know, I just feel like I didn't get anything out of this, and it was just disappointing because I feel like it had a lot of potential, but almost nothing landed in this book for me. We also have The Sister's Luck by Sherry Chankama, which basically is a weird manga anime feeling soap opera. It's so dramatic and just absolutely bonkers. I don't even know how to describe this book. It's about these 2 sisters who, one of them is really lucky and one of them is unlucky, and the unlucky one doesn't want to continue accidentally murdering people. So like she tries to get in touch with her sister, and literal like hell breaks loose. Like there are like angels and demons that just like start messing with everything on Earth. It's absolutely wild. As far as I know, it's not actually a series. Like this is just a standalone book where the most drama imaginable happens, and I didn't love it. It was weird and very melodramatic, like not really in an enjoyable way. So yeah, this one just did not work for me. And then the last graphic novel that disappointed me in 2019 was the first book in the Umbrella Academy series. I believe it is called The Apocalypse Suite by Gerard Way and Gabriel Ba. I was very excited about this book because there is a Netflix television adaptation of this series. I heard really good things about the Netflix series. I watched the first episode and I was intrigued by it and I was pretty excited about it, but I wanted to read the books first and then watch the television series. So I checked out the first book from my library and I read it and I was just like, interesting. I kind of thought that I maybe wanted to continue with the series and see how it went, but I at no point in the year had any desire to actually pick up the second book. And in retrospect, like the farther and farther I got away from it, I was like, yeah, I don't think that was very good. I don't really think I liked it. It's weird. I didn't like the incest. I didn't like the art style. It's an art style that I truly hated, and it just like made me feel gross reading it. It's very edgy, I guess, in a way that I didn't really like, and I don't know, didn't love it. I honestly like have forgotten a lot of the stuff that happens in that book. I just don't think I really cared about it that much. Like I read it obviously in the past year, but there are many details of the plot that at this point it's all just kind of a blur. I think that's why I just kind of realized I don't think it was that good. I don't think I really liked it because I didn't really retain anything and I have no desire to keep going with the series. And unfortunately, I never watched the Netflix show after that. The book wasn't as good as I expected it to be. I think that the Netflix show probably is better than the book, but I still just kind of lost interest because I read it. I haven't wanted to watch it, that's a bummer. Next up, let's talk about Carrie by Stephen King. This was my first Stephen King novel. I have been wanting to read Stephen King for so long, and I finally read him. I read Carrie this year, and I really liked it in the beginning, and I thought that I was going to like the book, but as the book went on, I kind of didn't love it. I don't really know how to describe how I felt about this book. It just kind of lost the creepy, unnerving feeling that I was getting at the beginning of it, and I started to get pretty bored by it. I didn't really feel scared at any point. I obviously knew the plot of it, but I still was kind of hoping something would impress me more than it did. It felt very stale and forgettable by the end of it. I just felt like extremely lukewarm about it. Like it was just so meh. I didn't like absolutely hate it, but I'm putting it on my least favorite books of the year list just in the sense that it was so disappointing that I didn't really like it because Stephen King is basically one of the most successful, famous authors on the planet. I felt like it should have been good, and it wasn't really, so it just was such a letdown after really wanting to read a book by Stephen King. I think that I would give him another try. I pretty consistently hear good things about Pet Sematary, and I've heard that Pet Sematary is one of his scariest books, so I feel like if I want to pick up Stephen King again, that's probably the one I'm going to go for because I want to actually be scared. After not being scared by Carrie, I want to read a horror book that like actually scares me. So I'm hoping Pet Sematary will do that for me, but in general, I'm not that excited about Stephen King anymore after reading that book, so meh. Next up, we have a middle grade book. This is She Loves You, Yeah, Yeah, Yeah by Anne Hood. This is a historical fiction book about these kids that really want to go see the Beatles. It basically is about the Beatlemania craze of the 60s. I was really excited for this one, and it just was not that good. The writing of this book and the plot of this book just were so far-fetched, and they just felt so phony that I just could not enjoy myself reading this book. It was so aggressively like, groovy, man, we're in the 60s. It did not feel natural whatsoever. It just was so cheesy. And I felt like it was such a shallow middle grade book in comparison to some of the middle grade books that I read and love. There is so much middle grade fiction out there that is genuinely so thoughtful and so well written. The characters and the themes can be so complex and so deep in middle grade fiction. But this was just a book that didn't have any of that depth whatsoever. And I don't think that you necessarily need that depth in middle grade fiction, because a lot of kids' books truly can just be fun for kids. I think that's also important for kids to be able to get into reading and just read a book that is silly and goofy and fun and enjoyable. But for me, it just didn't work for me, and I did not enjoy it. Yeah, it was a flop. The ending was so over the top, I wanted to scream. I hated it. Next up, we can talk about a YA contemporary that really didn't work for me, and that was Harmless by Dana Reinhardt. This is a book that deals with rape in a very weird way, and I did not like it. One of my pet peeves in books is when characters falsely accuse somebody of like rape or assault or abuse. It's a trope that I absolutely hate, and I did not enjoy reading about it in this book. I feel like the author was kind of trying to do something pointed with this, and I could see where she was going, but I don't think she pulled it off as well as she should have, especially with a topic that is so delicate and so serious. She really should have had a better handle on the content of this book, and I don't think she did. I really don't think that the points she was trying to make are gonna come across to a lot of readers. It was not enjoyable to read. I wasn't impressed by the end of it with what she did with this book. For a book that is titled Harmless, I feel like this book was a little bit harmful. Character and plot-wise, nothing in this book really mattered to me. Like, it didn't really work on any level whatsoever. Another YA contemporary that did not end up working for me, and similarly, I think it was because the subject matter was very important to be handled well, and I just don't think it really was, and that is Beast by Bree Spangler. I actually initially gave this book, I think, 3 stars, and then when I was reviewing it, I was like, this is 2.5 stars. Getting away from it more down the road after I've read it, I'm like, maybe it's a 2-star read. Like, I just hate it more and more the more I think about it. I really didn't like the main character in this book. I didn't like the emotional journey that they go through. It was extremely conflicting and upsetting to have to live inside the head of someone who is basically going through the emotional turmoil of accepting somebody for being transgender. Some of the stuff in this book that happens, like the transphobia that I had to read, was really intense. And on the other side of things, I'm just like, what did I gain from this book? I don't know. I really, really hated the main character, and I never reached a point where I liked him. If you're not familiar with this book, it's basically about a teenage boy, and he falls for this girl, realizes that she's trans, and basically he freaks out about this and has a falling out with her, and it's about them kind of rebuilding their relationship. But I didn't want them to rebuild their relationship. I wanted her to get away from him as far as possible, and I don't know. I just didn't love this. I don't think the author is trans. I have seen Own Voices reviews of this book that did love it, and I have seen Own Voices reviews of this book that hated it. So I think it's completely valid if you liked this book. But I just think I see where people are coming from that hated this book a little bit more strongly than I see the people that loved it. Yeah, the more and more I think about it, I'm like, you know what? There's nothing in here that I really enjoyed. To be honest, would not recommend that one at all. And I think that actually brings us to our last book. So this is by far my least favorite book of the year. I will link you to my Goodreads review and the reading vlog where I read this book because I honestly don't want to talk about it super in depth any more than I already have. But this was The Fin Dog by James Pruitt. This is a book of poetry. It is self-published. It wound up in my possession because I agreed to review it. And I was really excited to because I wanted to review and support independent poets. Like, I love poetry. I was really, really happy to receive this book for review. But I didn't really know anything about it going into it. And when I started reading it, I realized that it was extremely misogynistic. And the entire book is just a bunch of poems about this guy, like, talking about how much he wants to have sex with women. And I was just like, ooh, this is awkward. I feel bad ragging on this book more than I already have, but I mean, to be truthful with you, it is by far my least favorite book of the year. I hated it. It was so uncomfortable for me to read. I thought that the poetry was terrible. Like, it was extremely poorly written on a technical level, but also obviously I just didn't like the contents of this book. Like, yeah, I didn't like reading about this man talking about women in an extremely derogatory way. It just went on and on and on. Sorry, I hated this. It was terrible. That's just my honest opinion. Yeah, that was my least favorite book of the year by far. It just, everything about it, I actively hated. So yeah, that's that. So yeah, those were all of my least favorite, most disappointing books of 2019. Again, as with yesterday, I would love to know if you read any of these and if you also disliked them or if you liked them more than I did, because I would be really curious to see a differing opinion than the one that I have. I know some of these are books that a lot of people liked, so I would expect probably a lot of you to like The Grown Up or maybe even Beast, maybe Carrie. Feel like Carrie's probably popular amongst several people. I don't know. For me, they didn't work, and that's why they're on this list. But all in all, I'm not that disappointed by this. Like, most of these books had some aspects of them that I liked, which is why I ended up continuing to read them and finishing them. I'm happy that I don't have a list of like tons of books that I just absolutely despised. That's the silver lining that I guess I can find in this group of books. That is it for now. I will see you guys soon. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you very much for watching, and I will talk to you guys